Uh-oh.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Rabbi, as we're working through that technical difficulty, I'm going to ask that State Senator Fatty Kadora, if he would come at this point, and we welcome him, and we're going to work on this TV and HDMI and cables and things like that to ensure that we have an opportunity for clear communication. Thank you for being here on today. Our state senator is with us. Everybody say welcome.
Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Right away, right on the spot.
No, it's for you.
Speak right over here. Wow, I made it on time. Well, good morning, everyone.
Push it up.
Good morning, everyone.
There we go.
Honor to meet you. My name is Fadi, F-A-D-Y. I serve, it's a very common name in Indiana. I serve in the Indiana State Senate, District 30, which is the north side of Indianapolis, the upper 1/3 of the city. Honored to meet you today. Dr. Hicks, thank you, and to the organizers and leadership. Thank you to the leaders of the church for allowing us to be here, and for my esteemed colleagues in the panel. I will be brief. Dr. Hicks asked me to specifically speak about the moral urgency of the moment. And I think Dr. Craig would be a better person to speak on this, because when I was a PhD student, I had to review one of his books that talks about the moral languages of healthcare. Healthcare as a public good. It's been a few years, but I appreciate your work in that space. I'll be brief. My concern at this point is how we contextualize the discussion about healthcare and Medicaid within the larger political system and the political agenda of the United States, and how that political agenda is coming to Indiana and being rubber stamped by the Indiana General Assembly. So we can't talk about healthcare without understanding the larger context, the historical context of how we arrived at this moment. And to remind you of the last time our nation struggled with this issue, specifically the issue of healthcare, even though it's been more than 100-year struggle, that I am always reminded, and I think I've shared it with a similar group of Dr. Hicks and Rabbi Spiegel last year and Dr. Craig last year, is that this moment reminds me of the decade right before the Civil Rights Movement. The time when we had a Civil Rights Movement to fight for Medicare, Medicaid, and the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. And if you put things between this, contextually, if you look at the history between the Civil War, almost in 1865 until 1965, we had an era of black codes and Jim Crow laws. And during that period of time, the law, people were not violating and breaking the law. The law was broken because the law discriminated against people, and we had philanthropy responded to the needs of the nation through mutual aid organizations, including healthcare. If you remember, organizations like Anthem used to be a nonprofit organization for many, many years, and then they became a for-profit entity. But the struggles of the civil rights movement helped us accomplish significant wins for our nation. For those who struggled, who the nation was built on their backs, but they were left behind. And now we find ourselves in a similar place. We find ourselves in a situation where the national government has an agenda and an ideology. And I'm not speaking in terms of as a Democrat versus Republican. I'm talking about the politics and the policies of the national administration. So they passed what is called the Big Beautiful Bill. And the Big Beautiful Bill reduced Medicaid funding by $940 billion for the whole nation. So let me say one more time. they reduced funding for Medicaid by $940 million with a B. At the same time, it was the same piece of legislation that gave tax incentives to poor individuals such as Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. And if my tone was not, sufficient enough to convey my sarcasm, I hope that you understand that I'm joking. Jeff Bezos is not poor and does not need subsidies from the federal government. It was the same piece of legislation that viewed our country as those who, the haves and have-nots, those who should be rewarded and those who should not. And that theme runs through almost every single policy that the current administration is pushing forward. For example, think about immigration, not just healthcare. You only can come to the United States if you can afford, what was it, $5 million visa, the golden visa, or whatever they call it. It is an agenda that stands for the wealthy, an agenda that discredits the poor, an agenda that defines you based on your wealth, and if not, on your second-class citizen. So that's where healthcare is today. So what happened in Indiana? When that law passed, Indiana started moving aggressively and trimming and cutting not only funding, but also services. So last year with Dr. Craig and Dr. Hicks, there was a convening in Rabbi Spiegel, I think it was at the United Way building, when we were talking about Senate Bill 1 from last year, where Senate Bill 1, the top priority for the Senate Republicans, intended to cap the Medicaid program, and they had multiple iterations. The first iteration was they capped the program at 500,000 individuals. So we don't care if we have more people who need services, we're just going to control the fiscal impact of providing services under the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0. So what does that mean? That means that if people are sick in Indiana, they need access to healthcare, we don't care about you. That's when I say we, it's the universal we, not me. It's the universal we of state government saying, sorry, we have to deal with the dollars that we have. Now, I fully understand what fiscal responsibility means, but cutting Medicaid is fiscally irresponsible for two reasons. One, it makes people less healthier and they will demand more services. And they will be more receiving service at the emergency rooms, and they will not pay their medical debt or their medical bills. It will become medical debt. People will go into bankruptcy, or people will have challenges. Their credit scores will be damaged, and there are so many consequences to that. Insurance rates will go up. I mean, that was the whole premise of the ACA, Affordable Care Act, to bring the uninsured and give them some kind of coverage. But the double whammy with healthcare is that they remove the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act and then they cut Medicaid. So let me say one more time. They eliminated the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which will push more people into Medicaid, and they cut medical services. What services did they cut in Indiana to control the fiscal? Pathways waiver for senior citizens. Currently, we have 10,000 senior citizens on the wait list. And they, on a monthly basis, they send invitations, they receive, they enroll people and they kick people off. But the number is stagnant. It didn't change since last year. Some people got enrolled, some people got off the list, some people joined us. We're still at 10,000 senior citizens in Indiana, still waiting on services. The autism waiver and autism services, especially for young kids, they limited the number of hours that can be provided for children, and they reduced the number of hours or the rates for providers. With the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0, the red tape and administrative functions that are meant to delay and push people away. Instead of being lenient, hey, you did not submit this paper, come back, bring it back, and we will help you. You're denied. That's a strategy to get people off of the program. And this year, Senate Bill 1, which is the top priority for the Senate Republicans again, they titled it Human Health and Human Services. And they messaged the bill as fighting fraud, waste, and abuse. If you forget everything I'm going to say today, I want you to remember one thing and one thing only. Every discussion they are having about fraud, waste, and abuse is a distraction to distract you from demanding having eligible people near the program. It's a distraction. They want to tell you, instead of actually holding their feet to the fire and saying, why are tens of thousands of Hoosiers not on the program? They are eligible, they are born and raised citizens, they are legally present in the United States, and according to the rules of Medicaid, they qualify to be on the program. But rather than having that discussion and blaming them for their lack of performance, they shifted the discussion by talking about fraud, waste, and abuse, and their fear that Indianapolis will be the next Minneapolis. So, in committee, I've asked very direct questions to the Secretary of FSSA and to the author of the bill, and I repeated these questions on second reading. I introduced several amendments, and I asked the same questions on third reading. And I'll share with you some of these questions to help you think through what Senate Bill 1 truly means. So first, there's something in Senate Bill 1, by the way, that deals with both SNAP and Medicaid, not just Medicaid. So Senate Bill 1, currently, in its current form, that bill is drafted, there's something called the error calculating rate. The error calculating rate. So the big beautiful bill requires states, when they process Medicaid applications or SNAP applications, to look at the processes. Sometimes our eligibility for an individual changes. Someone might have a baby, someone might get married, someone unfortunately might pass. So every day, eligibility changes based on income, based on changes in life. So the federal government said, if the state agency did not accurately process Medicaid and SNAP, and that error, administrative error, not fraud, not waste, not abuse, by CMS definition, the error calculating rate are errors that are caused by administrative processing of applications. And CMS has a completely different definition for fraud, which is the intentional overcharging of the system or not delivering services and charging for those services. So CMS, the federal government, has completely separate definition for fraud, and they have a completely different definition for the error calculating rate. And what Senate Bill 1 does, it has nothing to do with any of the definitions or the references about fraud, and it's specifically about the error calculating rate, which said the following. If a state over-processes eligible users, and then they did mistakes by over-processing folks who should not be on the program or change eligibility, we're not talking about undocumented immigrants, we're talking about any of us who is a citizen, who lives here, who qualifies for the program, and then you got a better job and your income went up, but you stayed in the program. So that's an error in processing in the program. So the federal government will pay Indiana, make an overpayment to reimburse Indiana for people on the program. So the federal government said, if we overpay you, you owe us that money back. And if you do not process eligible people, meaning under-process, that's an error too, which is good. Then we will pay you for that. So currently, the error calculating rate in Senate Bill 1 is a technical definition that deals specifically with the administrative processing of applications by the state agency who must comply with federal law that only citizens and legal residents and a couple of other exceptions qualify for Medicaid and for SNAP. So it had nothing to do, zero to do with fraud. But what was the message of Senate Bill 1? Till last night, when the bill went to the House and they were talking about Senate Bill 1, we are combating fraud in the state of Indiana because we don't want undocumented people to be on the program. That's the distraction. That's the messaging. Now, I've asked the Secretary of FSSA in committee, in the Appropriations Committee, can you please tell me, point to me, which administration, and these are the 4 or 5 questions that I'll conclude with just for you to think through the logic of your arguments. Question 1. Are we trying to deal with existing fraud, or are we trying to prevent fraud, even though the bill is not about fraud? I was just trying to walk them through their own logic. The answer was, well, we don't know. Second question, are you personally, as the head of the agency, aware of any fraud in the form of a pending litigation or prosecution or cases that have been referred to the Attorney General of the state of Indiana under the Medicaid Fraud Investigative Unit? Publicly on TV, recorded and reported in the local news. They looked at the camera and said, I am not aware. Third question, if you think there's fraud, can you point to me over the last 20 years, we had one party in control in Indiana. Which administration committed that fraud? Because the last time I checked, for 20 years, the Republicans have been in charge of Indiana. And they said, we're not aware. But every program could have. And then the fifth question I asked, can you help me understand where in the bill, federal or state code, federal law or state law is referenced to code that defines fraud in this bill? None. Because the bill is not about fraud, waste, or abuse. The bill is about error calculated rate. So that's specifically for Medicaid. Now, what they're trying to do on the SNAP side, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, they're trying to have monthly redeterminations and additional red tape, and according to the analysis of the nonpartisan legislative agency, the LSA, if you look at the fiscal note of the bill, they said that this could impact up to 3,000 families of being disrupted. They qualify for the program, but just because of the administrative red tape, hey, go get these papers that we need and go through the process, they might kick off 3,000 people who qualify for the program, and they will be brought back. So no one can point to fraud, waste, or abuse. Finally, I've personally asked the Attorney General of the state of Indiana last year in one of the committees when he testified on behalf of his agency. And I've asked him directly, and I probably can go back and find the archived video, the date and the time if needed. And I've said, can you tell me, out of the $4 to $5 billion annual spend on Medicaid, how much fraud have you investigated, prosecuted, and recouped? And he told me, he's been in office for almost 4 years. He said in his 4 years, he investigated $4 million, $4 million out of the almost $5 billion annual spend on Medicaid by the state of Indiana. And that was primarily related to providers, not eligible users. Providers, maybe like physicians or hospitals, overbilling and doing different things. So I started this discussion by telling you, we must put the whole thing in a historical context. And the historical context is a political agenda that shifts dollars to the wealthy at the expense of the vulnerable in our communities. And state general assemblies are rubber stampers for the Trump administration. And as a result, they cut programs in Indiana. And the way that they distracted the messaging of that was to talk about fraud, waste, and abuse. And a couple of days ago, the governor signed an executive order to create a group of agency heads and others to look at fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, I want to be clear, and I want to be on the record. I stand with every effort to combat fraud, waste, and abuse. I don't support it, I don't tolerate it, and I think we should protect the taxpayers by making sure that our programs are not infested with fraud, waste, or abuse. But it's one thing to run government efficiently. It's another thing to claim that there's fraud, waste, and abuse as a distraction for denying people services that they desperately need and deserve. Almost 2 million Hoosiers are in Medicaid, different Medicaid services. What does that tell you about the state of our state? We have almost 2 million people. We are becoming more poor. I said final, and I think maybe I said it twice. So this is the final.
You're the Baptist church.
There you go. So bad habit. So this is the final.
Yeah.
If we were out of money, I might understand that they need to cut funding for some programs because we're going through an economic recession or downturn in the economy. I'll leave you with 2 data points. One, we are expected to close the fiscal year of state fiscal year 2027 with $5 billion of surplus. So that's not the budget. You know, we're expected to collect 46 billion and to spend 46 billion, that's the budget. But the extra dollars on the side, the surplus, is expected to be $5 billion. And from the $5 billion, Medicaid reported as recent as 2 weeks ago that through smart sizing, which translates to picking people off of the program, through smart sizing, they saved $450 million. $450 million as part of that $5 billion reserve. And the second data point, if the state did not have money, then why are they spending recklessly in other areas? I'll give you one data point on that. They gave data centers in Indiana, and listen to this, 50 years, up to 50 years of sales tax exemption. That is not budgeted, so it's going to reduce our revenues for the state of Indiana. They did not blink. They did not hesitate. They pushed through the law. 50 years. You all will be here in 50 years. I won't be here in 50 years. But they gave 50 years of sales tax exemption to data centers when technology changes every few years. We try to be reasonable by amending the law to say, how about you let them come back every 5 years to confirm that they're still in existence, and second, the technology is still relevant, and third, they're still employing people in Indiana. And they rejected even common sense amendments like that. They gave the Indiana Economic Development Commission, or corporation, $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion to spend on Lilly and other companies at the LEAP project in Lebanon. Last time I checked, Lilly is a $1 trillion+ company. I'm not opposed to creating jobs and attracting businesses, but these are messed up priorities. You let people die in your state and be hungry, and then they cut the Sunbucks program. Have you heard about that program? Lunch for kids during the summertime, $120 a month. They start every session, every day, by praying. We start with a prayer before we vote. Dear Lord, we ask you to help us to, use your wisdom so that we can serve the least among us, so we can take up the orphans, the widows, and the children. God, bestow your mercy on us to implement your laws, because your law is the supreme law, not the law of the land. And then 5 minutes later, cut programs, vote on cutting programs, vote on cutting programs. There's a disconnect. So I urge you, my friends, thank you for organizing today's event. It is a moral urgency, it is a moral crisis. A nation that spends more, as Dr. King said, that spends more on military expenses than social services is a nation that is moving towards spiritual death. And I hope that we can resurrect and reawaken our nation to stand on the right side of history. I want always to be on the side of the vulnerable, the marginalized, those who don't have voices, not those who have multi-million-dollar lobbyists representing them at the federal government and local government. So thank you for organizing this, and I appreciate it. Next, about 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you to State Senator Fatty Cadora for those remarks in depth that allow us to see with greater perspective what's happening right now. And so right now, Rabbi Aaron Spiegel is going to provide a presentation on housing. Housing perhaps is a public health emergency that needs to be talked about, but work needs to take place. And there's the opportunity before us to support a Streets to Home initiative and to support neighbors that are most vulnerable being warm on days like these. Thank you for being here on a cold day, a wintry day in Indianapolis, Indiana. You fought through the elements to be here. Thank you for those that are joining us by way of stream. We do want you to go to that QR code. Don't leave here or don't leave the stream without hitting that QR code that's available for you for our faith community consultation. It is our survey. Make sure you do that before you leave. And once again, let us provide attention to a very serious matter. The conversations that we are having today, we're tagging as consequential conversations because literally, these are life and death issues that we are discussing today. So once again, thank you, Rabbi Speaker.
You're welcome. Good morning again. Senator Kadura just reminded me, 1964, Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty. And regardless what you think about whether it worked or not, but the idea was to lift people out of poverty. I've been saying recently we're in a new war on poverty, but it's a war to create poverty or to lift up those who are advantaged on the backs of those who are in poverty. And our focus is housing, and I think that's a big part of it. So I'm going to dump a bunch of data on you today, but I think it's really important to understand the context for this, both in our city and our state, and then the implications of how housing is healthcare. So Indianapolis is one of the largest or worst evicting cities in the country. Marion County still files between 400 and 600 evictions a week. Indianapolis is about 25,000 evictions a year, and that has implications. The demographics are critically important. This is from our court watching data. We have folks that sit in court and collect data. The demographics of people in eviction court: 64% female, 56% young, 73% Black. The most common person in eviction court in Marion County are young Black females with children. And it's not a surprise, the most common folks, the fastest growing demographic of homelessness are young Black females with children, 2 children. We know that. The racial makeup of Indianapolis is only 28% Black. So we have a serious equity problem here. This is not just a housing problem. This is an equity problem. This is a poverty issue. I always put this in my presentations because I think everybody needs to know it. This is from 23 study in National Academy of Sciences. The most common age to experience eviction in America is childhood. We talk about caring about kids. We don't act like it. The most common age to experience evictions in America is childhood. I just did a quick search on the term housing is healthcare. I could have filled 20 pages with this, but it is unquestionable. Housing is healthcare. Housing has been identified as the core issue that affects all areas of life. You can't have stability without housing. You can't have food equity without housing. You can't have healthcare without housing. And yet, it's one of the only things in America that's not an entitlement. You got to figure it out for yourself. So the system is a problem. We say evictions are a symptom of a disease with 3 factors: lack of affordable housing, which is a serious problem in Indiana; out-of-state investment rental properties, which is also a serious problem here; in our Indiana law, and this should say lack of Indiana law. And make no mistake, in Indiana, evictions result in homelessness. It's absolute. Once someone is evicted in Indiana, their chance of finding stable housing in the traditional market is slim to none. We've been hearing from folks from an eviction court where they say, I'm going to leave the state because I know I'm not going to find a place. So we have an outflux of people leaving the state because they can't find housing. And they're employed, by the way. So why? The level of rent growth in Indianapolis particularly is unbelievable. So I want you to pay attention to this stat. From 2000 to 2021, this is in a 21-year period, rent growth in Indianapolis was basically flat, 4% over the 21-year period. In the second half of 2022, rent grew by 15%. So in 21 years, it was flat. In 6 months, in 2022, it went up 15%. What happened in 2022? We were coming out of COVID. The private equity world discovered Indiana in a big way during COVID, and they flooded purchases of rental properties in Indiana, and they raised rents because they could. The average rent price median now in Marion County is $1,625 a month. I don't know in what universe that's affordable, and this is not necessarily anything that's very nice. And my computer's locked up. So let's try that again. Okay. So the accepted danger point for homelessness as far as vacancy is 5%. This is not something I made up. This is known. We're trending in the wrong direction, folks. In 2023, we're at 4.7. So less than 5%, we were already in the danger zone. 2024, 4.5, we are now at 4.2, 3.9. This is Indianapolis, Marion County. So this means that there isn't enough vacancy to meet the existing needs. This is another reason why rent prices are so high. It's a market demand thing. And landlords, and I'm not criticizing all landlords, but landlords don't have to lower their prices. They also don't have to consider people with special needs. So people with an eviction, people with bad credit, formerly incarcerated. They just summarily dismiss them because they don't have to. It also causes the really bad actors who don't fix the heat in the middle of the winter to not have to fix the heat. They just ignore it because they know there's a long line of people waiting to get in this same unit and there's no enforcement here. So the next person moves in, there's still no heat, and they don't have to fix it. This is a fairly recent statistic, and it's mind-boggling. Half of all renters in Marion County are housing cost burden, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income on housing. This isn't low income. This is everybody. 50% of all renters in Marion County are housing cost burden. A quarter of them are extremely housing cost burden. 50%, that means they're paying over 50% of their income on housing. It's untenable. I often say they're a flat tire away from evictions. There's a study in Texas going on right now that says most people end up in eviction court for $250. $250. And we know that the average owed once they get to eviction court is $3,500. Where's all that come from? Fees, late fees, filing fees. And this is really disturbing. Among seniors and people with disabilities, 100% of them are housing cost burden, either at 30% or over 50%. 100% of renters, seniors, are housing cost burden. It's a fast growing population of the homeless too. People over 60. And of low income, 91% are extremely housing cost burden. I mean, they're just barely hanging on. So rent increases have been, this is over 30%. I need to update that, but the national average is 6. We have a problem, folks. There was a time period last year when Indianapolis had the highest rent increase in the country. Did you hear about it? No. Wasn't even in the press. We are now tied. Indianapolis is tied for 5th place for the most private equity owned rental properties in the country. It's not a distinction that I think we want. And it's going up. We're also rated high risk in the private equity index. And I want you to see it's mostly housing, but it's also jobs, healthcare, and public pensions. This is private equity getting into our business. And high risk is bad. We are within, somebody told me, within 5 years of being ultra high, so above 62%. And this has been my new talking point in the legislature. In 5 counties, central Indiana, there's $36 million a month going out of state rental properties. That's $438 million a year. That's just 5 counties in central Indiana. This is billions of dollars that are going out of our state to other companies. And private equity is not necessarily even out of state. It could be out of country. We just don't know. I just want to show this. Why is Indiana one of the most landlord-friendly states in 2025? This is not a friendly website, by the way. This is from one of the organization's companies that insures rental properties, encouraging people to invest in rental properties in Indiana. And here's why they're flocking to Indiana. In the country, there are only 6 states that don't allow a tenant to use, I can't use my rent to get the heat fixed, to get the mold remediated, to get rid of the rodents. And Indiana is one of them. Idaho, Georgia, North Carolina, North Dakota, Utah, and Indiana. And of those 6, Georgia and North Carolina allow rent escrow in the courts. It's not in statute. So it's really only 4 states. Rent escrow is where landlord's not paying my heat. It's cold outside. I prove that I've tried to make this work. I've gotten no satisfaction. I go to the court. I still have to pay my rent. But the court holds it until the heat's fixed. Then the court gives it to the landlord. Basically, tenants have no rights in Indiana. They have no rights. And I wish Senator Cadora was still here because he's the one that started this. So I want to show you the timeline. This was our 5th session in the Indiana legislature to try to get some kind of tenant empowerment. You'll see there's a common theme there: refused a hearing. So we brought this legislation 5 years in a row. We've yet to get a hearing. Not even on the floor of one of the chambers. We can't even get a hearing. This year, for the first time, I will say, was the first time I've had a substantive conversation with a legislator about a solution. We didn't get a hearing, but at least we started talking about it. And part of the problem is the Indiana Apartment Association says we will never support rent escrow. So we're trying to figure out what they will support that would give tenants some leverage against the bad actors. And if you haven't been following Senate Bill 285, this is the Cicero legislation. It's deemed the criminalization of homelessness because it makes public camping a crime, a Class C misdemeanor with a $500 fine. This is the 3rd year in a row it's come to Indiana. This year's sponsor was Senator Cindy Carrasco. It is already passed the full Senate. It's been assigned a House sponsor, Doug Miller, who's a good guy. We met with him this week. It's going to go, folks. You killed it last year. Enough grassroots support happened, but the governor wants it. The governor said, I don't care where people sleep. I don't want to see them during the day. So this is now a priority for the Speaker of the House. We're trying to mitigate the harms. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be calling our legislators, especially our House representatives, saying, we don't want this. It's been assigned to a committee. It's probably going to get a hearing next week. We don't know. But here's the scary part. The Cicero Institute, who's a think tank out of Austin, Texas, They say this is a compassionate answer to homelessness because it's better to arrest people than to let them sleep outside. Now, my conversations with our homeless neighbors, and I have them every week, is I don't want to be arrested. I'd rather sleep outside than go to jail or to be forced to go to one of the shelters that are horrible in our city. And by the way, it's an unfunded mandate. All the services that it refers people to don't exist here yet. So I believe that Senator Carrasco wants to make a change, and for the right reasons. But everything that she's pushing for, that won't happen. It doesn't exist. It can't work because we don't have the services. What we do have now is finally a true housing first approach to homelessness in Indianapolis. It's called Streets to Home Indy. The first phase of this is to house with services 350 of our most vulnerable chronically homeless folks by June of 2026. It's gotten a rocky start. We're getting a lot of pushback from sources that I wouldn't have expected, but we can make this happen. And this is the way to end homelessness, folks, not keep kicking it down the road and not keep making it so we don't see people. This is actually a way to get them resolved and back into society. Get engaged. I will tell you without hesitation that if it weren't for the faith community, this wouldn't be happening. The city's MO is we talk about stuff, and once it gets started and it gets hard, then we back away. Well, the faith community has been relentless on this. You have to do it, and we are going to hold your feet to the fire. So far, so good. The faith community has already also stepped up with move-in kits, and we hope soon with furniture. So when somebody gets housed, we're actually providing them with utensils and dishes and bathroom stuff and towels. And I mean, they have something of their own when they move into these places. We were charged with raising $270,000 as part of the philanthropy contribution. We're at $600,000 and we're still going. So I would encourage you to get your congregation involved. Whether you can provide funds or not, we don't care. This list of congregations, I want to see it tripled. So when it gets hard again, because it will, we're going to be the moral and ethical voice of this project to say, you can't back off. You can't back off. We have to do this. This is too important. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Spiegel. Are there questions? Yes.
Has there been any type of cost analysis between jailing persons and funding something like Streets to Home or
Sure.
building shelters?
There has. First off, I can tell you, we've known this for decades, that it is between $10,000 and $20,000 per person cheaper to permanently house somebody than to do nothing. And you say, how can that possibly be? Because across the system, doing nothing for somebody makes them our responsibility, we as taxpayers. So emergency services, healthcare, food, across the system. So permanently housing them, permanently for the rest of their lives, is cheaper by a lot. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the cost the all-in cost for Streets to Home, including the early administrative costs, is $31,000 a year per person, which drops over time. Because as soon as they get settled, services come to me. Am I eligible for Medicaid, Social Security, VA benefits? And as soon as I have an income, I start paying towards my living expenses. The cost to jail somebody is something like $2,500 a month. And they're going to get out and be in this exact same position they were when they went in. So I can just state categorically, it's cheaper to do this. And oh, by the way, it's the right thing to do. It's far cheaper to do this. Plus, we've seen in other cities that do it, many, if not most folks, end up going back to work. They become the people they want to be in the first place. It's the system that puts people unhoused. It's not them. It's not their choice. That answer your question, Lizzie?
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
so.
You had mentioned increasing the number of churches. What's the game plan for that increase?
This. And I joke with some people, I go to church than most Christians. I'm speaking at church almost every weekend. We're based on relationships. It's all about the relationships. So Pastor Hicks is telling his pastor friends, and I want you all to spread the word too. And then we're happy to come in and talk about what we're trying to do. I don't want to make the money thing the hitch. We want partners in this work. So it's, to answer your question, it's about making relationships.
I think that there's a number of churches that have new pastors. And so I think that, and a lot of them are younger, not that makes a difference, but they're new to a lot of this stuff. And so I think that somehow get into some of those churches would be something for those who are younger pastors.
Love it if you could make connections. It's our social networks. That's how this stuff works. Counselor?
Thank you for your presentation. As we take a look at embracing our homeless community, which my family has had a 17-year annual event, the last 5 years we've partnered with Columbia Club and we service our homeless community in different ways. We've identified that there are categories, couch surfers, that we don't see 1,700 or so men and women, children, families that are identified who are point time. There are people sleeping in their cars. Have we identified the categories and looked at opportunities to deploy resources that are able to help those specific individuals? We've also, through our very work through Soccer Souls, identified that so many individuals that actually don't want our help, need the rating mental issue.
Yeah.
And we have run into a lot of men and women those that are former militaries.
Sure. That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. First, I want to address your second question first. There are no people that don't want help. I think it's a fallacy. They're often, when asked, say, no, I don't want what you have to offer me. And this is not just here, this is everywhere. That's just a reality of the system. They would rather stay in a tent than go to one of our shelters. And a big part of this philosophy is getting them to trust me that I really am giving them housing and it's not conditional. That's a total sea change in the entire homeless system in the country. The second thing is everybody should read Homelessness is a Housing Problem. We know for a fact there's no direct causation between mental illness, addictions, even poverty, and homelessness. The thing that drives homelessness, the only data point that correlates homelessness, cities with high rates of low rates of affordable housing have high homelessness. There are plenty of cities that have higher rates of addictions and mental illness that have no homelessness. And we also know that expecting somebody to get clean while they're homeless is ridiculous. We got to give them security first. That's why it's called housing first. We get them housed, then at their rate, at their choice, they can they can deal with their demons. The point you make about people that are couch surfing or living in their cars is really important because they're not considered technically homeless. So these young women with children who are serial couch surfing are not technically considered homeless, which is insane. And we can't count them in the point in time count, which, by the way, folks, is not an indication of how many homeless people we have. It's just a relational indicator. So if this year was 1,700, next year it's 1,800, we know it's going up. We know there's probably at least 1,800 families who are homeless, and it's probably double that. But we guess, we just don't know. So we also have learned from other cities, Milwaukee's my favorite, that if we address the most chronically homeless, and that is a definition from HUD, but it's basically the people that are living unsheltered for X number of months over a period of a year. If we get them housed, then the amount of money that's freed up in the system to then deal with those who are living in shelters, and then those who, families mostly, and couples, there's a lot more money to deal with them because they're harder to find and they're harder to get resolved. So it's tough, but we got to start somewhere. And what we learned from Milwaukee and Houston and Cleveland and Dallas is if we deal with the people that we see, basically, which is mostly men, mostly black men, if we get them resolved, then the system is much more able to deal with everybody else.
One last question.
Sure.
Do you think that it's effective as we take a look at Senate Bill 285? I think you said it's going to be adopted in a couple of weeks. That we rally, support the code, and testify. I think that should be proven to work time and time again, up to and including the redistricting argument.
Yeah.
I think that when the communities are involved, I think that could influence our.
Absolutely.
Repeat the question.
So the question was, should we rally and testify against 285? Absolutely. How we got it killed last year was grassroots efforts, phone calls. Phone calls are always the best, folks. Phone calls, emails, and it never got to the House floor because there weren't the votes to carry it forward. That's going to be the most powerful. Senator Carrasco insists that this isn't criminalizing homelessness. That's an odd disconnect to me. If you're involving law enforcement, it's a criminal issue now. We need all of us to be saying, I'm sorry, you say that you don't want that, but this is the reality of what it looks like. We don't need to get homeless people involved in the criminal justice system. It exacerbates their problems 100-fold. So yes, and yes. Grassroots mobilization, people saying to their legislators, and I'll tell you, it's an echo chamber in Indianapolis, unless you live in Senator Carrasco's district, which is way south. I think it's Beech Grove in Johnson County. We need to get to our friends that live outside of Indianapolis. Call your legislators, tell them this is not okay with me. This is not okay. Beating up on the most vulnerable just doesn't make sense.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Spiegel. And that is a wonderful transition to yet another topic. We're appreciative for the presence of Dr. Gwendolyn Kelly. She is the vice president of the board of the Children's Policy and Law Initiative. She's also the vice president at the Africological Institute. And we worked down through the years on scholar activist, social justice issues. And so we're appreciative for her mind and for the guidance and direction that she always provides. I remember our first faith community consultation We had an opportunity as the Ministerium to hear her presentation. And while we were perhaps centering in and concerned about something, she brought to our attention the fact that 12 and 13-year-olds were being taken to jail as and with adults. And it was her research, her scholarship, her presentation that then led the faith community in that instance to rally and to ensure that we reached out well beyond, but within our influence, to ensure people flooded the State House for a couple of years. And then Children's Policy and Law Initiative was able to then, after playing defense for 2 years, push forward and get past positive legislation that kept 12 and 13-year-olds from going to jail as and with adults. We've also been able to work hand in hand for a couple of years on critical race theory that was perhaps a precursor to this environment we are in right now that requires us to continue to fight. In many instances, what we're seeking to bring before you today are life and death issues, consequential issues that allow us to see how public policy is keeping people from advantage, keeping people from progress, and keeping people from the hope that is necessary, specifically within communities that have had such withheld from them. And so Dr. Gwen Kelly is here on today, and we're going to ask that she might lead us as we look at this education portion of our discussion on today.
Is there an opportunity for me to plug in?
We could try.
We can try. There we go.
Can you move your computer on? Yeah.
That's six, you can keep talking.
You want to?
I can. So the Greater Indianapolis Multi-Faith Alliance, the Children's Policy and Law Initiative, the Concerned Clergy, the Baptist Ministerial Alliance, the BCC, Black Church Coalition. There are a number of organizations that continue to stay on the wall and continue to provide leadership within the faith community. But understand, our work is, as Rabbi Spiegel has indicated, not simply to educate ourselves, but it is to create the coalition. It is to create the relationships that are necessary. We have to ensure that as we are fighting for these issues, that, as Dr. Kelly will talk about, there is an IPS issue that we need to be careful around the entire state of Indiana, because what takes place here with that bill will have implications in other jurisdictions. We're looking at housing. Housing is not simply a crisis here, but what we do see here with the Streets to Home initiative, we see some solutions. We see leadership on the part of the state of Indiana. This is the same leadership that was provided as we even created the concept in Indiana that others followed along with. It came to HIP and Medicaid expansion to ensure that people had dental care and eye care. Seeking to provide leadership has been something that Indiana has sought to do. But where we are now with undue influence from Washington, D.C., where we are now with legislators that are intent on carrying out that which could only be categorized as evil when it comes to public policy, it's even more so important for us to make sure that whatever would seek to divide us evaporates, and that we have an opportunity then to combine our efforts and ensure that advocacy goes forward, that the call to actions that you've heard on today around Senate Bill 285, you've heard about Senate Bill 1, there are calls to action, and we need to make sure that we're pushing people to get to the phones. We're pushing people to write. We're pushing people to send emails, and we're pushing people to do things that are more creative and perhaps different than what the legislature wants you to do, right? There's a list of things that they want you to do and they expect you to do. Perhaps there's some things in these times that require us to think a little bit more creatively and to do that which not simply gets attention, but pushes the needle and brings light to the fact that because of public policy, people are dying. And so, Dr. Kelly, thank you for being with us on today to talk a little bit about education.
All right, Dr. Hicks has talked about half the things I was gonna talk about, so I don't have much to say, do I?
You'll do it better.
Take your
All
time.
right, so I want to thank you for being here. For those who are watching, concern for these topics that we have is great. And we're glad that you stopped and paused to take time to learn about some of the things that are happening in our community. Back in the beginning of the school year, a letter came out called a Dear Colleague letter. And that letter changed what happened in education in Indiana. Prior to that, I've written a paper called Dear Colleagues, and it's got 5 or 6 headings. And the first one being, what happened? And then what now? What next? And so what? So a Dear Colleague letter is a tool that the Civil Rights Office of the Department of Ed used to bring people into compliance with the civil rights laws related to education. And they're very important letters, and people perked their ears up when they heard about them because they said money could be taken away or our district could be sanctioned because we had civil rights offenses. But that department has been not totally dismantled, but almost dismantled. And reversed, instead of saying African Americans or people of color or someone with special ed needs, their rights have been violated, it's been switched to say, white constituents, if you've been hurt or if something has happened to you, then we want to investigate that. When the laws came out about DEI, I don't say the laws, the bills came out about DEI, it was just really hard to understand. Why would you want to take away the rights of people? Why would you want to end diversity? Why would you want to end equity? And why would you want to end inclusiveness? So DEI stood for diversity, equity, inclusion. And there is a move underway under the what now, what happened. It seems like, I'm speaking for myself, when President Obama became the leader of the nation, something sparked inside people. We thought, some people celebrated, but others saw it as a time when everything was changing and they were losing power. And so when people feel like they're losing power, they figure out ways to fight back to keep the power that they have. And so then we come with our new president. And one of the first things that President Trump did in his first administration was to issue an order saying, let's get rid of cultural competency, no more cultural competency training for the federal employees. And I heard it and I said, what? It was an executive order and it was kind of quiet and people didn't talk about it much. There were still diversity, equity, inclusion trainings going on. But this time, when he's coming to office now with his executive orders, these things have been written and they've been carried out. And governors across the state have either accepted them or they have said, no, we're not going to do it. So the Dear Colleague letter that came out with the power of the weight of the Civil Rights Office in Washington, D.C. to bring people into compliance. And usually they've been very helpful helpful documents. When I worked at the Equity Project at IU, a Dear Colleague letter came out that talked about discipline. And that we need to stop suspending children so much, and especially if it was disproportionate. And special education had compliance laws that had to be followed. And so when we would go in to investigate or to help provide assistance, they were glad to see us because nobody wanted their money taken away for special education. And what we found when we would go in to look at special education, we would ask for general education data also. And sometimes the general education data had more disparity. By that I mean more African-American students were being suspended or expelled than the rest of the general population, the rate. And so people would look at their data and try to figure out what to do because they would lose 15% of their special ed dollars to go to general ed for interventions if they didn't comply. And parents, they were looking at the civil rights officers were looking for parents who felt like the district wasn't complying and their children had been suspended for no reason or for the same reason that someone else had not been suspended. So that was the weight of the Dear Colleague letter. So when the Dear Colleague letter came out, it said, schools should not teach diversity, equity, inclusion. That you need to get rid of programs, you need to dismantle departments, you need to take anything that is teaching about anyone's particular culture, it has to go. And so our governor complied with that, and our Department of Ed and others signed off on it and said, yes, we will not do that, not really understanding what it meant. And so some states, like California, I think New Jersey, said, no, we're not going to sign that. And so let's fast forward a year later, here in January of 2026. It was ruled that the Dear Colleague letter was unconstitutional because it took away free speech and that it was not grounded in what it was requesting people to do. So the question is, so what now with equity inclusion? And a bill came out this year, Senate Bill 88, and I wanted, Senator Cador is gone, he's on the Education Committee. He and Senator Hunley, Senator Ford, trying to think of the others, predominantly Republicans, asked great questions. And the bill, before it even came to the floor for the Senate, it was stripped of the civil rights piece, the civic education piece that had in it the there would be a course that would include the 10 Commandments being taught. There's still a bill that's left that's got the 10 Commandments in it. And I love the Lord. I'm saved. I'm planning on going to heaven. I try to follow the 10 Commandments, but everybody knows they weren't. You couldn't even keep them. They couldn't keep them back then. And so we have a hard time keeping them down. And that's why Christ came. So, but on the other hand, if I have the 10 Commandments in the classroom, that means anyone else can have what they want in the classroom too. So, and it's supposed to be a separation of state and religion. So those bills, we need to watch those pretty carefully. As I said, there's still some that are pending. Some may not be heard, but then they're still alive on either the House side or the Senate side because they had similar bills on each side. Also in Senate Bill 88, there was a specification that we teach that children young people not have children before they are married. That's a good thing. And if I'm here in church, I'm gonna tell you, I believe the same thing. But to impose that on is that the classroom's responsibility? If I was talking to somebody in counseling, I might say something like that, but to make it that it's a rule now that it has to be taught, I'm just concerned about it. There are many children, and Senator Huntley gave the example, her mother she was a single mother. And she was in high school when she was born. And just the stigma that it puts on people, you find yourself in situations and you need support and help, more so than you need to say you shouldn't have gotten in that situation. Yeah, I've gotten in situations and I shouldn't have gotten into them, but help me get out, not shame me and tell me that my life is wrong. So this, back to this Dear Colleague letter. Why is it so important and why am I talking about it? So many of the things that have been done for our, against our civil rights, they've been brought down in court. The NAACP, of which I'm the state education chair for Indiana, I've looked at some of the bills, some of the legislation, some of the suits that have been brought. And people are beginning to win these suits because the things really are just, it's like they threw things on the wall and said, we're gonna see what sticks, and there's a stain that's left now that says, okay, we shouldn't have done that, but how are we gonna change what happened? So in Senate Bill 88, we just gotta be careful. I'm gonna talk about this just for a few more seconds and then move on. But in Senate Bill 88, it had a list of things that still you weren't supposed to talk about. This is the third year that this has happened, third or fourth year. The anti-CRT bills, culturally responsive, critical race theory is CRT. And so it was saying that we were teaching all the children there were racism and systems that were keeping them oppressed, and that it's a college course that would be taught with that. Professor Brown, who's at Indiana University, was on that original committee that put the critical race theory in place. And it was a law course. It wasn't something that we taught in a school. And so it's as if anything that had a term to it, like woke or cultural competency or the CRT, they took those terms and twisted them and turned them around on us to make us think that what we were doing is wrong, but really it's right. What person in the world wants to sit up and not be awoke with everything going around you? But they took the term woke and turned it around. Now I'm saying this because in education, I think, and I've talked to some teachers, they're confused. They don't know what to teach. They want to keep their jobs. They want to keep money coming in so they're not breaking the law. And the supervisors and people that are over them also don't know what to tell them about what to teach. So it's just left confusion. And so what now is, even though the law says some of these bills were illegal and some of the acts that they asked people to do, we're stuck now with what came out of that. Indiana State, where I went to school, we had an African American Cultural Center. Charlie Brown, African American Cultural Center. They took the word culture off of the building. No, they took the word African American off the building. So it was still a Charlie Brown Cultural Center. And they want to combine everybody together, like we all have the same needs, which we don't. There were places of affinity that people wanted to go to, because when you're on a campus that's a predominantly white campus, there are not that many African Americans down there. IU has about 4% of the population that is African American. Indiana State has a higher percentage than that. But when you're on a campus, and just like everybody is white, and go to homecoming, everybody in the band just about is white. you need a place where you can go and feel like you belong. A place, many times that you are the first one there on the campus from your family. People have not gone to college before, and you're there representing, and you need someone to help you maneuver through all this. Some of the departments that were set up with counselors to help children, young people who were in college and help them navigate their way through. Some of those departments were shut down. DEI officers and initiatives were shut down. And so people lost their jobs based on this legislation that was not even true. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in right now. Dr. Hicks asked me to talk about 3 things, and one of them was the Black Academic Excellence Plan, which the NAACP put out in 2022. I don't know if you can get that up on your screen, Dr. Hicks. I sent you a note. You can find the Indiana Black Academic Excellence Plan on the Indianapolis NAACP website. And in that plan, it looked at, we called for a diversity equity officer for the state to look at what's happening with education. And then we also offered 15 strategies for how to improve education. And there was a law that was written, Senator Greg Porter carried that law, that bill, and asking that there be a diversity equity officer, and looking at many of the things that we had, that we had in the plan. For example, mandating full-day kindergarten, making sure that parents are engaged in their students' learning. Districts supporting it. There was a bill that said every school had to have a cultural competency plan across the state of Indiana. And we had factors in there that would make the plan work. Last year, the last week of the legislation, that bill was crossed out. I mean, a line was run through it. No more social emotional education, no more trauma-informed support training, no more cultural competency training, no more. Those are probably the main things. And those were still in Senate Bill 88. We saw them that were written there. And there's another bill that is trying to clean up the language in all of the bills related to education. And it is, it's Senate Bill 104. And it's got a lot of changes, things taken out, and they're gonna try to push it through, even though the legislature is short. This session is short, it's still gonna be tried to push through. And that strips out so many things that were taken out of legislation last year. It was really sad, because we had been working for since 2004 on culturally responsive practices. Representative Greg Porter had a bill that passed in 2004. And in 1 week, they stripped everything related to cultural competency and the needs that our children have, the mental health needs. Those things are still needed. What they did say was the state couldn't pay for it, but other people could get money to pay for it. We lost scholarships. There was an African American scholarship in the name of Bill Crawford. And any African Americans could apply for it and get 4 years. We have a shortage of teachers. We have a shortage of African American teachers that's even greater than the shortage we have for all teachers. And so now, last year when the bill changed, only 5 counties have students that can be eligible for those scholarships. Marion County, Vanderbilt County, Evansville, Allen County, Fort Wayne, St. Joe, where South Bend is, thank you, and then the Gary, Lake County. 5 counties are left. Like there's nobody living in other counties, which they are. But that's the only place you can live to get the Bill Crawford scholarship now. So it's things that they did, and our Democratic Black Caucus negotiated that. People were kind of upset that it went that way, but they didn't know what happened behind the scenes. There are many things, like you said, you're talking with people behind the scenes. Well, stripping some of the things out of the Senate bills that talk about culture, that was done behind the scenes. So it's good if we can go down to the State House and meet the legislators who have written bills. They may not want to see you, but they have to. I mean, you can, if you can't talk to them, you can talk to their legislative assistants. So back to the academic, the Black Academic Excellence Plan. Some of the things, it looks like they've been stripped away, but the other things are good things that need to be done in order for our children to survive. We had at the beginning, there was some principles that all students need to be followed. I mean, all schools need to follow in thinking about how our children can survive. I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. If a school is an excellent environment, it provides an opportunity for access and opportunity to be fair for everyone to have a high quality education no matter what zip code. To have grade level appropriate instruction, because many of our children are getting A's and B's and they're coming home and those A's and B's are not worth what they say they are because they have not had grade level instruction. So that's something that we really got to work hard to make sure that happens. If I was in a school one time and it was a 7th grade class and they were doing 4th grade math. I knew it because I knew the curriculum. And they were just like, oh, the teacher was so proud that the kids were doing what they were doing. I'm thinking, that's not even grade appropriate. So they're getting good grades on something that's a lower grade level that needs to rise up to where it is. And I think schools are working toward doing that more, looking at the standards and trying to make sure that children are introduced. That's something that must happen. So the Indiana Black Academic Excellence Plan is on the NAACP website under education. You can find that. Now, another thing that the NAACP is starting is a campaign for attendance against chronic absence. So we've got, there's a school that was in the paper last year based on the 24-25 data, where 50% of the seniors were chronically absent. So chronically absent means that students are missing 15 days or more. And so nearly 800 schools across the state of Indiana have less than 10% that are attending school on a regular basis that are chronically absent. There is I've got a chart here. I wish I could show it. Oh, thank you. You got that one up. The chart shows who is like a pattern of who is absent. And last year, 26.9% of Black students were chronically absent. That means 1/4 of our kids were chronically absent. And so you all tell me, if you don't go to school and don't show up, what happens? Can you learn? You're not online, you're just out. So there's an urgency of now that we're talking about where we're looking at who is chronically absent. And so the younger children are absent more so than like 4th, 5th kind of levels off, and then it goes high again in the high school grades. That's by year. Okay. So we've started a campaign and we're going to be passing out pledge cards to talk about what it means to keep your word and your promise and try to go to school. There's going to be a panel here in Indianapolis in the spring about being a chronic, what a chronic absenteeism and what's happening in schools. As we've tried to engage with schools, churches, and organizations, we found that there's some schools, I'm not gonna name them here in the city, but they're really struggling with attendance. Middle schools and an elementary school that we approached. And they don't want certificates, they want some money so they can buy incentives for the kids to come to school. So, that's kind of taught us that while we're trying to help in one way, schools are seeing that there's a different thing that they need. I need to wrap up, don't I? So I talked about the attendance plan. You're gonna be hearing more about it. We hope that you will keep your ears open. Your school, you might be coming to your school or church. I've got some cards here that I can pass out so you can share it with children in your family so that you can talk about attendance with them. Those are some of the materials that we're using. How they can see those. But I'm going to wrap up by saying that we've got to decide what we're going to do. We were told that some of the things were illegal that were happening. So now, are we going to just let things stay at a status quo? Or are we going to continue, are we going to start fighting if we have to make things go back like they were? We need diversity, equity, inclusion officers at every one of the high schools at the district level to recruit teachers and to make sure that our children, especially at the college level, I keep saying children because it's, to me, everybody's young, okay? But to make sure that our young people who are, and even older people who are going back to college, that their needs are met. So it's a kindergarten through 12th grade problem, but it's also a high school problem because they've really been impacted with the legislation. And we keep fighting back and trying to get laws that are being written so that they will override some of the things that have happened. I just urge you, as Pastor Hicks said, to be sure that if someone tells you about a bill, you need to go ahead and call, and the number is easy. You just go on the website for the General Assembly and call and ask to speak to the senator or to someone on the staff about a certain bill. Didn't talk about IPS real fast, but I'm gonna really wrap up. In the state of Indiana, in the first, on the House side, no, it was on the Senate side. I haven't been in the House to testify this year, but on the Senate side, there was a bill for South Bend to have their school board appointed instead of elected. And it just came out of the blue. And so we've been hearing behind the scenes that it was because I didn't talk about charter, I didn't talk about voucher and the public traditional school system, but money is coming out of the public system, going to charter, going to voucher. And the voucher money is for private schools. And if you want your child to go to a private school, that's good. If you want your child to go to a charter school, I understand that, because you think that the traditional public school has not done what they need to do by your child. However, there are some charter schools that are doing very well, and there's some that are doing just about the same as traditional programs. So don't get fooled. The problem is that every parent and community person needs to make sure that every school has best practices and that they're doing the best for our children. No matter where you live, so you don't have to go all the way across town to get an education. If the public school system is eroded, then that means that there's not democracy for all. Why did public schools come into place? It was so that the citizenry could be knowledgeable, so they could vote and read legislation. and know who to vote for. So that's not gonna happen if we siphon everything away to the charters and to the voucher. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap up and say, there was something else I was gonna say, but I won't say it. I'll let Dr. Hicks wrap up.
All right, we'll take one question, maybe two, but want to have questions real quick. I want to present just very quickly on not on education. We've heard education, we've heard housing, just a little bit about health. I want to talk about that a little bit, but are there questions for education right now? Dr. Kelly.
Can I ask a general question? What happened to civics in high school?
Repeat the
Civics
question.
is still taught.
It is still gone?
Right.
Not the man.
And so that's why the senator pulled that bill, because the things he had in there were already being taught in high school. There's social studies in grade 5, 8, 10. They have U.S. history. And then civics for the seniors, economics and civics go together. So it's taught, and there is a course that's taught already.
But it's not prerequisite no more.
It's what?
It's not a prerequisite?
Yeah.
You graduated, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we have heard a number of issues. We've heard specifically that the response is to reach out to senators, reach out to representatives at 317-232-9400. You can find them at that number. We have heard about housing and how legislation will impact housing. We have heard about education and how legislation impacts education. As I indicated in the very beginning, I am privileged to have worked for this past decade with Dr. David Craig, and we published a study in 2019 that was a study on the Healthy Indiana Plan. We worked over the last few years under direction of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Interdisciplinary Research Leaders Program, and have produced a document as we concluded called Fight On 2025. You can find this research at africological.com. You can also find in our appendix the Black Academic Excellence Plan that is found once again at africological.com. That brochure, that booklet that was presented by Dr. Kelly. You'll also find testimony from Rabbi Aaron Spiegel. Last year, as we went through this legislative session, as things were beginning to shift, we knew that there was a document called Project 2025, but we cared to, even in that environment, approach the State House, and not just our research group, but friends of our research group and other advocates, people that believe that this legislation is, I guess it was Senate Bill 2 last time, now it's number 1, but last year it was Senate Bill 2 that we tagged as a kill bill. A kill bill because in that initial presentation of the bill, it reduced the number of people on Medicaid, specifically HIP Medicaid in this area, the Medicaid expansion, from to 500,000 people. It kept the number at 500,000 while there were almost 750,000 people already on Medicaid. We don't know how they intended to take people off. Anybody born on Tuesday and Thursday, I think that was Dr. Craig's theory. But then there was another heinous cap that was proposed. The cap would have said that you can only have Medicaid for 36 months, which means you either have to get sick quick or don't get sick again. I don't know. But those were taken off because of a great coalition, Tracy Hutchin Getz and Who's Your Action from the south of the state, and our group, the Community Leadership Board, of our study that we did that's in 5 urban centers around the state of Indiana. We had an opportunity last year to work, and we present in this Fight On 2025 document that's on front of our website at africological.com, we present this panoply. A panoply, that's the weapons you use to fight. And so we were able to look at not just testimony, but this faith community consultation that took place last year. We were able to look at the various different ways we fought for Medicaid. We fought in 2025 in this legislative session. That is available now. It's a free download. Please send it to everybody because it's open source for a reason, so that we can provide examples, so that we can provide inspiration to people, not just in Indiana, but everybody in this country is dealing with what's taking place right now. This provides an opportunity to share how we fought for Medicaid in Indiana, but there may be other issues that can benefit from the type of things, the type of work we did, shall we say, right? We leaned into purpose and determined that even when people would be muted because it's more politically expedient to hush, that our call even is to ensure that those that are vulnerable, those that do not have a voice, receive voice. And so our entire project was around amplifying community voice through a community leadership board that Dr. Gwen Kelly led, and our entire staff. We reached out to determine in 5 cities. We had in-person and Zoom sessions, and we talked about health equity issues. We were helpful with redetermination, so people, when they had to re-register at the end of the public health emergency, there were efforts across the entire state to bring attention to the community. So we were able to register for Medicaid, but as well, because of that atmosphere, there were stipulations. There was a more robust and a friendly website that was created at FSSA because the question was begged by not just our team, but by a community of people that determined that killing people was wrong, that we would, in fact, provide hope and example. We've created consequential reports. Just as we're having a consequential discussion today, we created a consequential report as we entered into the session before. In 2024, we floated a positive impact statement that said that smart money uses federal money. 90% of the money for HIP comes from the federal government, from expansion. The other 10% comes from an excise tax. It comes from cigarette tax, so that it's a zero-sum proposition to utilize resources to keep people well. It's a workforce issue because a healthy workforce means that companies will be stronger. Indiana will be stronger. We proposed a streamline because we're seeking to, with this consequential report, let people know that it is a financially sound proposition to utilize this HIP resource, but it's also probably a good idea to streamline a little bit by only having one HIP. So as opposed to having 5 different types of HIP, have one HIP so that everybody has dental and healthcare that's a part of HIP Plus right now, and nobody's bumped down to HIP Basic because there's no HIP Basic. And even now we are a part of an amicus brief, right? Another way we fought to be a part of an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief that is attached to the research of the Africological Institute, Dr. Craig and I, that 2019 study, Health Equity, Urban Congregations and HIP. Much of the work was done here, even in this Bradley building, as we reached out to the community to hear their voice. What we sought to do, even in a case that is before the appellate court in DC right now, destined for the US Supreme Court, we attached our research, our data. We have amplified sufficiently community voice so that those that are being negatively impacted the most by this heinous public policy that is coming down the pike, we have provided an opportunity at the greatest level of the judiciary, at the appellate court in DC, and as it goes to the US Supreme Court, the voices of the members of this community are amplified to say that we are negatively impacted and that literally people are dying. People are literally dying right now. And I had an opportunity Wednesday to go down. Tracy Hutchins Getz, part of our crew, she testified. And I listened and I wouldn't say appalled, I was saddened to see people come and present Senate Bill number 1 and refuse to even use the word immigrant because it seemed like in their talking points, even those that consider themselves to be civil on that side of the house had to use the words illegal aliens. And when asked specifically, and there's a position brief that we've come out with, you'll find that on the website as well, that talks about Senate Bill number 1. It talks about some impossible regulations that are in Senate Bill number 1. It says that you have to, for 3 months before you can apply, you have to show that you've been working for 3 months beforehand. If you're going to register, you have to register everybody in your household and determine the immigration status of everybody in your household before you apply. When asked specifically, these senators from our state who present this law, when asked specifically how a child that was born as a U.S. citizen could get the health care they need to live if they're in the home of somebody that does not have the appropriate papers, it almost felt to me as if though they were happy about the fact that this law would then require that child to turn over another person, and they would be turned over to Homeland Security was their answer, and be deported, and that child would be sent to the Child Protective Services. This is a plan not to cause financial stability where we already have a $5 billion surplus. This is a plan that is a part of a mega narrative that says that if we can figure out a way to get Black and brown people and poor people out or disenfranchise them, and in the case of SNAP, starve them, and in the case of Medicaid, straight kill them. There are kill aspects, once again, as we fought last year, Senate Bill 2, they upped it in priority to Senate Bill 1 right now to push forward work requirements that are impossible and to figure out ways to continue to make a vulnerable population even more vulnerable because of the legislation that is being pushed forward right now. And so for those that remain on stream, those that are here, please take time to call 317-232-9400. Take the opportunity to talk to leaders, take the opportunity to encourage, find this information that is available on the Africological's Facebook page, on africological.com. Find this information that is floating right now, send it to somebody that can, along with you, voice in some way. And my challenge, once again, come up with a creative way. Do all of the standard things that are expected of us to do. But understand that the cure for cancer is not going to come in a linear way. The cure for cancer is going to come in a cyclical way. It's going to come from around the corner. There's going to be some creative thought that is necessary in terms of that jeopardy and vulnerability. The same type of jeopardy and vulnerability is associated with the legislation and even the litigation that is being pushed forward, even to the Supreme Court, as we've had an opportunity to be a part of this amicus brief with that litigation, but with legislation that is coming down the pike from that big ugly bill. And as we have people that are in leadership in the state of Indiana that have acquiesced, they have bent the knee to that which they know full well is, yes, a part of a process that seeks to disenfranchise and to hurt and is unapologetic about it. And so in this instance, it's our responsibility. Let's make sure we're calling our representatives. Go to africalogical.com, fill out that survey that's before you so that we can find more information out about you. Reach out to us if the Africological Institute, the Ministerium, the Greater Indianapolis Ministerial Alliance, the Center for Policy and Law Initiative. Let's make sure that we're reaching out to organizations, getting all of the information we need so that we are equipped and we are empowered in order to very simply call down and let every representative and senator know that we're calling to oppose the work requirements that are a part of Senate Bill 1. We're calling to oppose the work requirements that are a part of Senate Bill number 1. We're calling to oppose Senate Bill 285. We're calling to oppose homelessness that has been being treated as if though our neighbors are criminals, and not having a house and being outside too long then lead to not just arrest, but arrest records. They arrest you for misdemeanors or for felonies, and it goes on your record, which follows you. And when you arrest people, that does not mean that it's okay. That is not humane. That is in fact heinous. And so, yes, Dr. Kelly.
Following on what Dr. Hicks is saying, my point that I was going to make that I forgot was about IPS. So IPS now, there's legislation that started last year. They wanted to take over IPS's transportation system and the facilities, and that didn't pass. But the last week of the legislature, they put some of those things back into a bill and said that a board had to be formed, ILEA is what they call it, to look at how Indianapolis, the district schools and the charter schools could work together to provide transportation and facilities. And so a board, they recommended that a board be formed called a corporation over IPS, which will still have the right to elect a school board, and the charter schools, who will have 3 representatives coming from the charter schools to be on this board, 3 representatives from the district to be on this board, and then 3 people that the mayor chooses that have, they know about urban issues, and they have to live in the IPS district. So one thing that has happened, they've had testimony that was like Wednesday, is usually the education committee meets, and they'll vote probably the next time with more amendments. The Democrats usually are the ones that have the amendments that are going to be added. And from the House side, they did get the bill changed so that it wouldn't start in 2026, but it will be in 2028 when it starts. And then with the immigration, there is a bill now that wants ICE people to be able to come into the school to get kids. Now, school is supposed to be a safe place. And teachers in the past have not been able to turn, if you're the daddy and I'm the mother and I've got legal custody, I cannot, as a school official, I can't turn the child over to you, the father. But someone coming in with a mask, an ICE person, they're supposed to turn the child over. So that's Senate Bill 76, so please oppose that. And I'm going to be pushing that out a little bit more. IPS bill is 1423. We just want to be, it's more fair now than what it was, but it's going to happen. They've been working toward this for years to have, just like they wanted to have an appointed board in South Bend. I see this as a template that could happen across the state because choice is what they wanted. And it's been coming in for like 20 years. And it's been turned away, and now they've got a really strong foothold in the mostly in the five counties that I talked about earlier. Charter schools are coming into places that have more of an urban African American and Hispanic population, and most of our children who are choosing charter are coming from the brown and black population. And the voucher programs, most of those, the majority of those children are white. And yes, you can take advantage of it, but you don't get the total amount of the cost of the voucher program, or the private program. Sometimes that has to be subsidized. And so if you go to a public school, public traditional school, especially in Indianapolis, you're getting special ed services and voucher, and charter schools are coming back to IPS for special ed services. And there's a debt that IPS has now because they've been servicing more children than just those that were in their boundary. So I'll leave you with that.
All right. Thank you so much. Are there questions for any of us? We want to make sure that we have an opportunity for little dialogue and discussion. I know our time is gone, but we've received so much information today. Everybody say thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Yes.
What implications does SB1 have on our rural neighbors and rural hospitals?
Right. SB1 has the ability to disenfranchise even further those that are in rural communities and those that are in poor communities. The nature of this problem is it's a problem of intimidation, right? That the laws are being set up now in Senate Bill 1, even as we dealt with Senate Bill 2 last year, that these things are set up to keep people away from healthcare that would save them. What we're dealing with right now is, if we look at our Latine population, we see that they are afraid to go to the hospital, and that remedies for serious conditions are sought in home remedies or in the corner of barrio stores or bodegas, or some remedy that a parent had back in the day. And they are afraid because they have been kept away, and regulations now allow for federal authorities to go and find you. They're setting things up so that people can be deported. So I told you before, Wednesday, Senator stood up, and when asked whether or not this was intended to kick people out of the country and to deport people, unapologetically and with the hubris that for me is once again sad, they stood up and said that, yes, these are not unintended consequences. These are intended consequences. And the intended consequences are that people that are already hurt will be further hurt, and that people that are particularly Black and brown will continue to be pushed over the borders or killed by the policies that we see in place right now. And so the vulnerability for those that are poor, right? The vulnerability for those that are not a part of an upper echelon or the greedy 1% of the 1% that stand to benefit from what's taking place right now.
And you didn't ask, Lizzie, but insecure housing proportionally is far worse in rural Indiana than it is in the cities. Far worse.
I have two different questions. Is there a bill in place to stop all the investors that are coming in from out of state? Because I dealt with one, and it's like right now, that I wouldn't about my home. And I do that. I was fortunate to be able to do that. But I think about how they can raise your rent $200, $300, $400. But they don't even live here in town. So
Right.
they're communicating with people that don't even live here. Are there any bills in place to help stop how many investors can come into the community to buy homes?
At the state level, no. Tempted several times. Senator Kadura, again this year, had a bill called the Nexus Bill that required if I have X number of properties in Indiana, I have to have a local representative. My experience at the General Assembly is every time I bring up something about private equity or out-of-state ownership, They don't want to go there. Well, that's a violation of the Constitution. We can't regulate state-to-state commerce. I don't think they understand the implications. They will, but will it be too late?
Is it 60% or
Yeah.
60% of landlords are from out of state?
And then number two, for education, and I follow education and everything, I had to go to the State House. I really think the community doesn't understand the implications that are coming from Bill 1423. When you take a look at education and what is happening, as was described, the white families are using the vouchers, the black and brown are sitting in charter schools, and you have public schools that have everything. To me, this is just Jim Crow 2.0 segregation. But then, how can we hold these schools accountable? Because to me, there's really no accountability, because if you have a school, or you have a school that gets data, that's 4%, but we still have people attending those schools. When to me, every neighborhood should have a good school, a public school. You shouldn't have to travel across town. So I think there needs to be more accountability, but real accountability. Because I know when we did 11th grade before, you had schools that said they were A, but they had F data, and they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And so I think to see what's going to happen, because if you look across the country, every city has public schools, has a public school system that are educating, and what's going to happen, I think there needs to be more outpour with the schools and holding schools accountable. Not even with IPS, really in a whole. We need to take a look, because I think it's going to happen. A lot of families will end up sending their children to the townships if changes come out the way we think they're going to come out. So how can we get the word out to more families and people to be at that State House, and next week, whenever it is, to speak up against it? We know it'll probably pass, because we already know what's happening, we're keeping up with it. But the families are the ones who are losing, and the children are the ones who are losing, and not enough voices are being said for those families and for those children. So that's my opinion, and we've talked even when it comes to education, and I just think we're at Jim Crow 2.0. Project 2025 said this was going to happen, and it has happened.
Absolutely. What we are seeing right now was scripted. It is playing out before us right now. And it is incumbent upon us to fight, nevertheless, that through reaching out to the legislature, making those phone calls, doing the civic evangelism work that requires us to open our mouths and let our neighbors know, and even voice perhaps in different ways, unusual ways, multiple ways, our feeling that's based on fact that what's taking place right now is extremely harmful, and we need to speak out. We want to thank you all for being here on today. We're not leaving. Let's take some time after this. I will tell those that are with us by way of stream, thank you all for being with us on today. Please find us at africalogical.com. You can find information there about all that we have talked about on today, and specifically find information, get the data that is available. A lot of the Medicaid data is available, but there's also data available on education, on housing, the other issues. Find us at africalogical.com. Let's continue to stay on the wall. Let's be vigilant. Let's be determined, despite the fact that there are laws that seem to be intent on hurting, so much so that we might be numbed. We might have the tendency to shift into neutral and to let things pass us by. But if we have a voice, we need to speak. And if we understand what's going on, we have a responsibility. There are those that cannot easily fight for themselves. It's our responsibility to fight for those that cannot easily fight for themselves. So thank you for being with us on today. And we're looking forward to the fight that does continue. Somebody say fight on.
I don't.